And afterward, I will pour out my Spirit on all people. Your sons and daughters will prophesy. Your old men will dream dreams. Your young men will see visions. Even on my servants, both men and women, I will pour out my Spirit in those days. I will show wonders in the heavens and on the earth, blood and fire and billows of smoke. The sun will be turned to darkness and the moon to blood before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. And everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. Something big is about to happen very shortly. How do we know something big's about to happen? Because we're going to have a very unique, not unique, but a very rare event taking place on April the 15th of this year, which is the Jewish Passover. It will begin on that day, the beginning of the Tetrad. You say, what's the Tetrad? The Tetrad is a very rare phenomenon where we have 4 lunar eclipses taking place back to back without any eclipses between those 4. Okay? Total eclipses. And what makes this particular Tetrad very rare is that it just so happens that this year, 2014, and next year, 2015, all 4 total lunar eclipses will take place on the Feast of the Jews. But this is going to be very significant because, again, a Tetrad is very rare, and on top of it, for a Tetrad to land on Passover and Tabernacles is extra rare. To tell you how rare it's going to be, even though we're living in a time of lots of Tetrads, we're not going to see a Tetrad ever again that's going to land on the feast days until 100 years from now. So this is it. We are not going to experience any Tetrads during the feast days except starting April the 15th will be the first of the Tetrads. So this is a very unique time in our history and what we're going through. Joel says, the sun will be turned to darkness and the moon to blood before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. So he tells us the signs to be looking for. And basically he's saying, look up in the sky because the sky is a big digital divine billboard. If you want to know signs, look up in the heavens because God has given us the heavens as signs to us, at least according to Joel. Now, somebody might say, well, now, Bishop, I just don't believe in astrology. Well, neither do I. I'm not talking about astrology. Astrology is a pseudoscience. It's not even science. It's witchcraft and sorcery. We're talking about specific physical signs in the heavens of the sun turning dark and the moon looking blood red. And Joel says, look up. That's what God's going to do before the coming and the great dreadful day of the Lord. I'm going to give you those signs so that you won't be surprised when something great and significant happens. Now, we should not be surprised at this. Because in Genesis chapter 1, when God made the sun, the moon, and the stars, he actually tells us from the very beginning why he created these 3 objects. Why are those objects in the heavens for? Listen to Genesis chapter 1, verse 14 in the King James Version. It says, and God said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for, what does it say? Let them be for signs, and for seasons, and for days and years. Now notice, there's many reasons why God gave us the sun, the moon, and the stars. He wants us to know when the seasons are up. He wants us to know how to count days. He wants us to know what year we're in. But notice the first thing God says, I want you to remember, is I'm going to give them as signs first and foremost. Not just for seasons. Not just for days and years. I'm going to first give it to you for signs. So the first mention of the sun and the moon and stars in the Bible is that they're for signs. So God tells us there's for signs. So why do I ignore signs if God says I'm going to give them as signs to let you know what I'm about to do in the earth? So he gives them to us as signs. Think of what King David said about the heavens. In Psalm 119, verses 1 through 4, listen to the words of King David. He said, the heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day, they pour forth speech. Night after night, they display knowledge. There is no speech or language where their voice is not heard. Their voice goes out into all the earth, their words to the ends of the world. You know what he says? God created the sky to talk to us. Question is, are we listening to what the signs and the sky is telling us? Do we look at this tedra that lands on these Lord's feast days and say, well, I don't hear anything that God's saying? Or do we say, wait a minute, something significant is about to happen. This is a very rare phenomenon. The tedras hasn't happened. It only happens 7 times since the time of Christ. It's happened 7 times, and now it's happening in our day. The tedra landing on the Lord's feast day. And David said, the signs, the sky, it's talking to us. But too often, we don't listen to them. But we ought to realize how important signs are, because did not God give the men of the east, which we call the wise men, a sign? Did he not give them a star? And was that star accurately telling them that the king was to be born in Bethlehem? Did they not work it out, and did that star lead them to that place? Absolutely. So when we look into the Bible, it's nothing unusual to have the sun, moon, and the stars talk to us and give us signs. So right now we're about to embark on the first of the 4 tedras on April the 15th on Passover. And is that significant, or is that an accident? I believe it is really significant as we're going to take a look at it. Now, in the Jewish Talmud, which is the book of tradition, it says in it, and I quote, when the moon is in eclipse, it is a bad omen for Israel. If its face is as red as blood, it's a sign that the sword is coming to the world. That's what the Jews believed. So they looked at this in the time of Christ, saying, these are real signs, and we need to look at what's happening to the heavens. This is not just the Jewish Talmud, but of course the prophet Joel talks about it. But wait a minute. Not only does Joel talk about it, the signs of the sun and the moon, not only does the Jewish Talmud talk about it, but are you ready? The chief apostle of our Lord, Peter, talked about it too.